Now, it's recently come to my attention that I've once again become a jaded boomer asshole about video games. And this is no surprise to me, it's happened several times before, as I've lived through the death of all of my favorite games of all time. And so I figured if the future looks bleak, it might be time to look towards the past and remind myself why I fell in love with gaming in the first place. And along the way, I'll attempt to answer the question, does the 360 hold up? Well, back to Jester's box of wasted money. I wonder what random game we'll pick today. Ooh, random! Oh, look at that, I picked the big one on top. That's right, today we'll be playing Destiny, the original Xbox 360 version. And I just quickly wanted to show off one of the only pieces of merch from Destiny's history that I still think is pretty cool. That being the collector's edition of the Taken King, which was supposed to represent a stash of Cade's goodies, including some notes he's left for you, such as the coordinates to the Sleeper Simulant's quest, and as well as that, some patches and stickers, and a strange coin, an oddly high-quality metal strange coin. As well as that, this collector's edition also included a steelbook version of the game, which was... the Xbox One version of the game. Well, never fear, because I have several copies of this game. I've purchased it way too many times throughout the years, and yet still can't play it on my modern console because the game doesn't register that I own all of the content because I didn't buy the Ultimate Edition. Because I already had all the expansions, so why would I buy the Ultimate Edition? But that's the only one that the marketplace registers, so I can only play the trial on modern consoles. Pretty fucked up. Unfortunately, I am also missing my original 360 Destiny disc, and so I've had to order another copy on eBay for like $6. This shit is not that sought after. And unfortunately that delayed my making of this video for a good week and a half, which means this video will not be releasing alongside the Edging Farts DLC. Unfortunate, but whatever. But let's jump right in. Does Destiny 1 hold up? No, obviously not. It was a FOMO game to begin with, and the Xbox 360 version of the game was only supported up through the Taken King anyway. But having played all of this content throughout the entirety of Destiny, at least Destiny 1, having done everything in the entire game, that meant I had 3 fully leveled characters who had completed every raid, gathered every exotic, everything in the game. And so I'm left with the dilemma of, do I delete a character in order to play the game from a level 1 base level, and at least somewhat experience what the game would be like if I picked it up today? Or do I just choose a max level character and then replay the content with 0 challenge and 0 progression? And so I figured I would just meet in the middle and delete one of my characters and then grab things from the vault as I might need them or want them. Unfortunately, this was kind of a hard decision to make. These characters have a lot of sentimental value to me. Back then I played every class. Not equally, I was Hunter main for sure, but after I was done with my Hunter stuff for the week, I would usually go back and play the raid and do trials with my other characters. I have a ton of cherished memories on each of these characters from all the time I spent playing with my friends throughout this game. But, fuck it. Gotta let go of the past sometimes. Plus, the 360 version of this game is on separate servers than the Xbox One version, so I still have my fully completed Rise of Iron's endgame characters anyway, so doesn't really matter. I chose to delete my Titan, my least favorite class, and started as another Hunter, my favorite class. And the thing that's kind of surprising about Destiny's intro is that there really is a lot coming together in this game to build a sense of wonder within you. Even knowing what Destiny turned out to be and having uncovered all of the secrets, I still can't help but feel this rising sense of adventure in my chest when I see these intro cutscenes, and some of the moments that build towards the future of the series by hinting at greater things. It feels like I'm back in day 1 of the beta, with complete faith in Bungie that they would be able to handle this project.
We called it the Traveler, and its arrival changed us forever. Great cities were built on Mars and Venus. Mercury became a garden world. Human lifespan tripled. It was a time of miracles. We stared out at the galaxy and knew that it was our destiny to walk in the light of other stars. But the traveler had an enemy, a darkness which had hunted it for eons across the black gulfs of space. Centuries after our golden age began, this darkness found us. And that was the end of everything. But it was also a beginning.
It's kind of crazy how closely this intro mirrors the development of Destiny in the first place. It was such a hopeful project that we all had our sights on and believed would be the next big thing. But then, the darkness came. The darkness being corporate greed and an underappreciation of the talented artists that would have made this game great for years to come if they had stuck around and continued to develop the project. And that is kind of the story of Destiny. Its bones were built by so many creative people. Joseph Staten created all of the lore, Martin O'Donnell created the soundtrack, and was let go before the project even completed. But his music was completed. Destiny originally was such a shambled mess where they had so many great pieces that could have been put together to make something truly great, but instead it was completely fumbled. And Destiny 1 is kind of the story of how Bungie eventually managed to put together something great out of the many great pieces of art that were designed for it. To me, I attribute all of the quality of Year 2 and 3 to the efforts of people who were unjustly let go or had to make distance from the company because of its toxic, greedy nature. And I think that's why Destiny 2 has so many moments of nostalgia baiting. It's not just that the players want to go back and play the old content, it's that the modern lore fucking blows, and they've been scavenging off of the corpse of Joseph Staten's work ever since he left the project. In my eyes, that's why Destiny 2 seemed like such a steep dip in quality that would kind of eventually level itself out. I don't think it was, as many people think, just the Destiny cycle of starting with something trash and then eventually putting the pieces together to make something actually satisfying. I think the reality is, Destiny 2 was the first time that Bungie had to stand on their own two legs and make something of their own without the help of their tried and true legendary artists of their past. And to me, that's why I've never felt the same about Destiny 2 as I did Destiny 1. Even if Destiny 1 had its ups and downs, the bones of the game were really solid, and there's certainly a reason why a ton of Destiny 1 original players still to this day play this fucking piece of shit game that we all know sucks. We want it to be as good as Destiny 1 was. And I believe a lot of these early game moments of wonder and these concepts that seem so grand really stick with you. It's because of the efforts of the mistreated artists in the original Destiny development cycle. I mean, just look at some of the concept art in the update install screen. They are beyond cool and absolutely piqued my curiosity from an early point in understanding what Destiny was or was supposed to be. And one of the nostalgic, iconic concepts that really stuck in Destiny 1 players' minds was the original tower, which I think is so many times better than the D2 tower. The D2 tower is so fucking cluttered, it just does not feel like this majestic area where super soldier defenders of the last bastion of humanity would be hanging out. The Vanguard War Room table alone gave such a distinct feel to the leadership of the Vanguard. They were the most elite members of their classes, positioned here to work together and find a path through the darkness, even if Cade spends the entire time complaining, wishing he was somewhere else. Instead, Destiny 2's Vanguard were just kind of standing around. Kind of fucking sucks. And let's not forget that Eververse at the time was just a small nook added here into this kiosk, which was previously just used to pick up the pre-order bonus, I believe, or the Ultimate Edition bonus that was just like a red ghost shell, the only ghost shell in the game until the Taken King. It's wild to think that at one point I was very capable, without dipping into my bank account too much, of purchasing everything in the Eververse store, because at the time I desperately wanted Bungie to succeed with this project, and so I was absolutely voting with my wallet because I loved Destiny. Even at its shittiest, I loved Destiny. And I think I saw a vision for Destiny that a lot of people missed, or just didn't want Destiny to be that in the first place. Which was, to me, Destiny was supposed to be a game where you're just one in a sea of guardians, doing your patrols and your missions that maybe have a small effect on the world, and maybe just allow you to pick up bits of the lore through the busy work that you would be doing as a Vanguard member. In my eyes, you were supposed to be a grunt that would eventually build your way up and become legend. But in my eyes, that would require years of work. And I don't think a lot of people wanted to do that. I think a lot of people wanted a more Halo campaign. They pick up, finish day one, and then they're a hero who continues to be a hero for 10 more years. And I just find that to be super boring. I believe the original vision for Destiny, which was horribly telegraphed to us and undermined by the hype and a lot of the marketing, was for us to make these incredibly small steps forward, which would eventually build towards bigger and bigger stands against the darkness. And as bad and boring as the Destiny 1 campaign was, and the base game was, I do believe it kind of succeeds in that notion. You spend the majority of your time in this campaign just learning about the different enemy factions, and slowly chipping away at some of the leadership within those factions. I specifically think that the Fallen act as one of the better ways to express this small path towards eventually beating back the enemy. The many individual houses each have a bit of personality to them that you learn about as you take out their barons, their archons, and eventually their kells. And the fact that this faction is kind of a ragtag band of space pirates that are kind of barely holding themselves together despite their technological advancements due to their proficiency and worship of that technology, it makes it so that doing these small strikes to take out their more powerful units are tangible actions that us as grunt soldiers in this army can take to slowly chip away at these factions, even though those many pieces could eventually be replaced by something else. In fact, potentially something stronger, such as we saw in the House of Wolves when Skolas emerges and is immediately a considerably bigger threat than anything else we've seen in the Fallen faction. I think the Hive were also a great second faction to introduce because their lore is so rich and eventually builds towards universal threats, but on an aesthetic level, they kind of just look like zombie necromancer style enemies that don't seem to have any sort of grand purpose. But the information we pick up along the way as we fight them becomes immensely relevant later on. The way I look at it, the first half of Destiny is pretty well put together as a simple introduction to this world that you're going to live as a grunt soldier in. The most basic of the enemy factions, the dregs and the thralls, can swarm and take you out. But the second half of Destiny is really where things start to kind of fall apart. We're introduced to the Vex by the Exo Stranger just before we get the infamous no time to explain cutscene. I think Bungie at this point realized that they would need some kind of building of action in order to end their game on a big set piece, despite needing a humble starting point for the platform of the rest of the series. And so they picked the Vex, which are a pretty simplistic faction. A hive mind of microscopic nanobots controlling robot shells, who are arguably the least threatening faction, who could be a good starting point for the rest of the series, and then they made the awkward decision of building them up as potentially the most dangerous threat imaginable, which they could only really accomplish by manufacturing the metaphorical threat of the darkness in physical form through the final boss fight with the Dark Heart of the Garden or whatever. I think that's where the Destiny campaign really went wrong. I think they should have, instead of building the Vex to be this ultimate threat, gave us a small-scale situation to stop, and then end the campaign with more of a this is just the beginning notion, and that the real threats are soon to come, which they attempted to do but kind of fumbled it. But the thing is, I don't disagree with the fact that the Vex should have been the main threat of the base game. In my eyes, it was just a mistake to make it seem much more grandiose than it is. Kind of contradictory towards the Vex being these almost purposeless robots who are just there to terraform and kill people. It doesn't feel like they should have a grand purpose to them. And I think that's why the Vault of Glass works so well as the first raid. The stakes are utterly insignificant. Atheon basically has no effect on the outside world. The entire raid is just kind of a gathering of Vex, manipulating time in strange ways that we don't appreciate on our home turf. And it's such a perfect isolated experience because there's so much rich lore and storytelling in the various armor pieces and weapons that you can only really experience by delving deep and completing the raid several times. The ambiguous nature of it all left that many more mysteries to uncover. And overall, completing the Vault of Glass, it wasn't this thing that was celebrated by the Tower, the Vanguard, by anyone really. It was a personal accomplishment, because we knew that it was difficult and we completed it. And one notion that I find really interesting is the kind of underdeveloped idea that canonically in Destiny's universe, that the only group that ever really completed the raid were the world's first winners of the raid. Everyone else is kind of just walking through that gameplay experience completed by that original team in more of a meta way. And again, I think that harkens back to what I perceive to be the vision of Destiny. Becoming legend was kind of on you. You weren't going to achieve that just by playing the game. Just playing the game made you just a grunt soldier. And the real legends of the community, the people who soloed raids, the world's first teams to beat raids, or just doing something wacky that goes viral, these became the true legends of Destiny in a community sense. But that notion didn't exactly last long, because the average Destiny player just kind of wanted to play through a legendary experience, and so the campaigns were more tailored towards those grandiose stories you could play through. But in my eyes, I kind of see that as an irony, because if we're all legends, then none of us are. We're all just the Guardian from this point forward. Anyway, the final faction, the Cabal, are kind of the least interesting to me. They made sense as just a military might faction that just destroyed planets and harvested resources. I really fucking hated the direction they took in Destiny 2, where Callus was just literally hedonism bot. I thought that shit was hella cringe. But the kind of bland nature of the Vex and the Cabal really makes the second half of Destiny drag on and feel like this sad, boring experience. And back to the concept of the video, does it hold up? Playing through Destiny again and feeling that same boredom that I've felt several times as I've played through the different campaigns over the years, it really reinforced the idea that this game doesn't hold up. Because I've spent plenty of time going through a kind of lonely experience grinding through this game in an attempt to get higher gear and therefore be more valuable and be able to clutch up later when I'm playing with groups of friends in nightfalls or raids. I wanted to be the most experienced, well-equipped, and reliable player. I wanted to be able to pick up the slack of my less skilled teammates. And so all those lonely moments grinding out in really boring content, they had meaning to me. I was begrudgingly climbing my way further up the ladder so that way I could pull my friends up along with me through harder endgame activities. But playing today, there is no motivation to grind this boring garbage content. I'm not going to be playing with any of my friends, and I'm probably never going to be doing a Destiny 1 raid again. These boring, lonely moments are just that. They're boring, and they're lonely. And they make me really nostalgic for a time where I'd still be in this game waiting for my friends to get online. But my friends are never going to come back to this game. No one is. And so the bulk experience of the Destiny campaign and leveling sequence getting to that max level, they do not hold up in the slightest. There's no reason to play through the story content, especially when the final boss is just an ambiguous black ball of goo that they attempted to retcon later on but still doesn't make any fucking sense. And the same goes for the strike content, which doesn't really give you anything except an XP boost, and that hold up even worse than the main story content because the matchmaking will never give you teammates. There's no one playing this game. And so you'll eventually load in solo and have to fight through base game content with 3 times the difficulty than you would expect, which just results in these insanely long, drawn-out combat sequences with a bunch of blue gear that's not going to have the perks you would need to efficiently take out these enemies if this was an endgame activity like a Nightfall. It's really unfortunate because I remember liking a lot of these strikes, but their intended purpose of being 3-man activities is completely depreciated. As well as that, there are several Crucible-based quests and bounties which you cannot complete because no one's playing Crucible. You can't find a match. And so we're not really off to a great start as far as this game holding up. But let's continue anyway into the Dark Below and see if that has any interesting gameplay. And the first thing that is kind of interesting is the way that they've integrated the first 2 DLCs into the base game. The Dark Below is accessible after you first beat the Sword of Crota mission on the moon, which has been removed from the main quest of the base game and sunk into this separate quest along the Dark Below expansion. The same could be said after completing the quest for the Vex Gate Lord's Eye and returning it to the Reef, which then unlocks the House of Wolves DLC. Both of these have been integrated into the game pretty well, but that being said, no one in the world is going to experience this game like this. This isn't the game really where you delete characters and play them over again. Now back to the Dark Below, the story mission segments of this expansion are really just more of the same. It's really just boring filler that's meant to explain the lore of Crota and the stakes behind taking him out, and then they give you another strike that, again, doesn't really hold up. Doing these strikes today at the level you would find them at, and doing them alone because there's no one in the matchmaking, essentially just makes it a Nightfall without the interesting perks and without the powerful gear you would need to bring into them. Completing the story of Dark Below also gives you the Murmur fusion rifle, which is one of the most interesting weapons that has ever been added to Destiny. It's just unfortunate that it's a fusion rifle and they fucking sucked in Destiny 1. This is a legendary weapon that allows you to switch between arc and solar damage, which has kind of become a staple of exotics in Destiny 2. You definitely wouldn't expect to see this in Destiny 1 in a legendary weapon. But the one thing that does make the Dark Below stand out above anything else in the Xbox 360 version of this game comes down to the fact that this version of Destiny exists before the final balance patch that came after the Rise of Iron, which updated many of the raids, adding new mechanics and bolstering the loot pool, and making the Crota's End raid unsoloable, forcing you to stop at the bridge, I believe. But because this is in the Taken King version of the game, Crota's End is still soloable, and is the one raid that I could really effectively do whatsoever in the Xbox version of this game. And so, rather than reaching the required level that I would need in order to attempt the Crota's End raid, I just switched characters to my other character with max level gear, and did a quick and easy solo run of Crota. And this was probably the experience that held up the most of anything that I played. I got to complete a raid that was 10 years old, and I got to refresh myself on all of the encounters. That's something I couldn't really do with Atheon or with Kingsfall. I'm not going to get 6 people together just to play these raids again. I don't even know if I could do that because I don't have an Xbox 360 mic anymore. However, besides it being kind of a fun experience and a trip down memory lane, this is a depreciated old raid, and the only drop that I got were some useless upgrade materials and an old piece of armor. Now that was Dark Below, so let's move on to the House of Wolves. And what's surprising to me is just how high quality I found this expansion to be upon this replay. I don't remember thinking of House of Wolves as all that exciting or interesting. But in hindsight, playing it now, this expansion brought so many revolutionary ideas to the game that you still see constantly in modern Destiny. It was like a complete pass over the Fallen faction, adding new abilities and enemy units, including explosive shanks, sniper shanks, and the Scorch Cannon, which has been fucking utterly overused into the ground at this point, and it's hard to remember a time when it didn't exist in the game. That being said, it is an immersive relic, so that's more than we can expect from like 90% of modern Destiny mechanics anyway, so we'll take it. On top of that, the stakes of House of Wolves are really interesting, because it is a fallen faction that is kind of scraping themselves together after having been destroyed by the Queen. The way they go about attempting to reorganize their faction is strangely genius and powerful, and presents an actual threat to us. The way that Skolas attempts to resurrect his House of Wolves is by going into the Vault of Glass and obtaining time technology, allowing him to rip his old destroyed faction out of time and into the present, which he's only able to do minutes before he's eventually defeated by us. Like, just imagine if he would have taken this project further, how devastating that could have been if the Fallen, the technology-worshipping aliens, had found time travel technology that they ended up using on a massive scale. The themes all come together so so perfectly here. Like I said, the Vex don't feel like they're that imposing of a faction despite their incredible abilities, because they don't ever really seem to have a purpose. But when you pair that with the Fallen, a faction of weakened aliens who were once very powerful, and who very clearly have a goal to regain that power, you kind of get the perfect thematic storm, and it's definitely a shame that this wasn't expanded on in a full yearly update. Would have been really cool to see the entire Earth kind of swarming with House of Wolves members who have unique abilities based on time travel, and our desperate attempts to try to get that under control. Again, it really took me by surprise how cool this expansion was. I guess I forgot so much about it, or was just so fatigued by Destiny in general that it kind of flew under the radar. This was also the expansion that brought almost all of Year 1 into relevancy through its endgame material, the Etheric Light, which was a huge revitalization of a ton of weapons from the base game. And so does the House of Wolves hold up? Yeah, surprisingly well, just out of having cool, interesting story moments and unique innovations that it brought to the game. Definitely surprising that the House of Wolves and the Dark Below held up so well, when they were originally looked at as severely disappointing. By far the biggest point that doesn't hold up about the House of Wolves is again a matchmaking issue. In order to unlock the Prison of Elders challenge modes, you have to first run an instance of the match-made version of the Prison of Elders, which is basically impossible. This is not an instance like the Strikes where it will launch you solo if you wait long enough. The Prison of Elders will not run without 3 people. And while I could have just switched to one of my other characters who has it unlocked and played through that, I just really don't care. Prison of Elders was never all that much fun, and it's again an activity made for 3 people. Especially the Skolas one, which can't be done solo, I believe. And so let's move on to the Taken King, what many people believe is the best expansion that Destiny ever saw. And I would probably agree with that. This was the first time in Destiny we were faced off against an immediate and world-ending threat, and it marks a severe escalation of the things we are having to deal with as Guardians at that point. I think the visual storytelling was on point, especially within this first mission that has you going through a Cabal stronghold that's actively being taken, and the introduction of the Taken themselves being these familiar assets but with unique abilities was a really smart way to reuse content in a fresh and interesting way. Oryx is a unique villain in Destiny because he's motivated by revenge for us killing his son Crota, which is kind of a plot hole if you know the lore of the Hive. He's not supposed to care if you kill stuff. Their religion is killing, and that was kind of addressed in one of the recent seasons in Destiny 2. I don't think the plot hole was filled though, it was just kind of pointed out. Where the Taken King doesn't hold up is knowing that I'm not going to be doing the raid, and knowing that the end of the Taken King campaign just ends with Oryx taking himself into his ascendant throne, something you can only eliminate him from by finishing the raid. It is kind of disappointing, and I wasn't all that invested in the story, obviously. The Taken King also has one feature that really should have been an important lesson to Bungie, but they would make this mistake many times later, and that was that the Taken King gives you its new subclass early on, so that way you can play with it throughout the rest of the DLC, hopefully fully leveling it by the time you have to do raids or anything that might need it. And the 3 new subclasses were all pretty awesome, especially the Night Stalker, which would see its utility in basically everything in the entire game. Unfortunately, Bungie failed to learn the lesson of how valuable this was to have a new subclass with an expansion of content at the beginning, and have since either not included subclasses at all, or had small bits and pieces that were only obtainable after the main campaign. Or in Edge of Fate, don't have anything, just a ball minigame throughout the campaign that's fucking embarrassing. Anyway, moving along through the Taken King's main story, you end up getting a lot of face time with Cade, a character that we already kind of knew was a cool maverick who didn't really want to go along with the bureaucracy of the Vanguard and more just wanted to do his own thing, which is a major plot point in the early game of this DLC. Without Cade undermining the authority of the Vanguard, we wouldn't have established a landing zone there, and probably would have fucking lost the entire Earth, let's be honest. And this campaign is weird because it's basically the only time that Cade was ever actually a good or interesting character. He established himself as a character so thoroughly within a handful of cutscenes in The Taken King that he's still a beloved character, even though he was either not included or dead in most of the Destiny content that has ever been made, or he was corny as fuck in the Destiny 2 main campaign. kind of just goes to show how a small amount of good writing and charisma from your voice actor can go quite a long way in making a character memorable. And unfortunately, that's kind of all of the good things I have to say about The Taken King. The rest of The Taken King, as far as I played, was all kind of the same. Again, just boring story missions that only really serve their basic function of telling story. And that's a story that I already know quite well. Even the standout moments, such as the fake out where the mission ends but then doesn't really, as the Taken invade on you and then push you out of the area, and the mission where you have to use stealth to get to Crota's soul at the end of his raid, they've lost a lot of their impact just because I'm replaying them. I've already seen them and had that moment of shock in realizing something different was happening in Destiny already. And The Taken King also introduced a feature that was one of the most damaging mechanics that Destiny has ever introduced. And it was so benign the first time it was introduced. And that was these tomb husks, which are given a name as though they're anything, but in reality, it's just a ball to put into a socket. And if you've even for a moment played Destiny past the point of The Taken King, then you'll know that these balls have been utilized in just about everything in the entire game. Even in the quality content such as the Wrath of the Machine raid. It is such a simple and easy way for Bungie to just throw a mechanic in. It was like crack to them. They could not stop adding ball mechanics, going so far as to create a meme about dunking, which was referenced in the main story of Destiny 2. And you know, I can get the meme. I get that it's fun to be part of this funny joke where the Guardians keep dunking energy in the form of balls into stuff, and it's dangerous. Ooh. But the reality is, it's a fucking lazy crutch that has been overused by Bungie since, I don't know, 6 years ago, and yet they've still continued to do it, even having exotics that the only function is that it gives you a ball when you get kills or something, and the Strand Tangles being integral to that subclass. This was the death of Destiny. This was the death of creativity. There are so many interesting relics that fit the role of the ball, but in immersive and satisfying ways. These balls are a joke at best, and at worst, they kill the gameplay of the game. Anyway, that got a little heavy, but we finish out the main Taken King campaign with the mission Regicide, where we eventually take out the Taken King and send him to the raid. And overall, this campaign is pretty short and not all that fun to play. It very much mirrors the base game, except there's more meat on the bones in the form of lore and switch-ups in the formula. So does the Taken King hold up? No, not really. But I guess that kind of isn't the Taken King, is it? Because the real core gameplay of the Taken King all took place after the main story, at which point you would start grinding levels and doing your weekly activities to get more power, completing the Nightfall, getting the new exotics, doing the Court of Oryx, and all of that was satisfying at the time because it meant you would eventually be high enough level to complete the raid. And the thing is, I'm not going to complete the raid. I'm not going to level this character fully. The motivation to grind out levels is just not there on a replay. And even if I were to switch to my other character who has all the levels and all the weapons, what would there be to actually play? I guess I could run a solo Nightfall, but that's about it. And that's the real answer to the question, does Destiny hold up? The answer is no, because you can't play Destiny anymore. All of the content that I've gone through so far, except for the Crota's End raid, is all the prequel to the true Destiny content. And Destiny is really just a game you play in the moment, grinding levels so that you can be powerful enough to take on the endgame content whenever that comes out. Destiny begins the second the main story ends, and it has always played that way. And there is only one form of Destiny ever, whatever the current season is, and whatever current game is currently being supported. That is the nature of the live service model. So no, Destiny does not hold up, because there is no Destiny anymore. Everything I played through was just the molted shell of a Destiny that moved on to be something worse. Destiny 2. And I don't think it was really all that valuable to play the D1 content that still exists. All it served to do was remind me how boring the content was in between those exciting, powerful moments where you achieve something with your friends. I don't really want to think of Destiny as a boring game where you grind story missions that you're not really interested in because you've seen the content before. When I think of Destiny 1, my memory goes back to the very last moment that Destiny was relevant, the very last hard mode Wrath of the Machine run I did, and the very last DPS phase I ever did in that content. To me, Destiny is truly just a memory, and it's a beautiful memory. In my mind, that memory is me sitting side by side with 5 of my closest friends, a real ragtag group of weirdos, to be honest. I had my high school friends, my ex-online girlfriend, a 40-year-old dude, his wife and their kid, and various other people who would filter in and out. People who at the time I talked to on a daily basis. And at that point, it didn't matter if the person by your side didn't pull their weight in the raid, didn't have the right weaponry, made us wipe 100 times, or was being kind of a dick. All that mattered in that final DPS phase, standing on those columns, firing everything we had left at Axis, was that we were a fire team. And we were united in one goal of finishing that experience, so that we could all get whatever relevant piece of gear that we wanted out of it. That is what Destiny is to me. And while the memory holds up, the game certainly doesn't. And as sad as that is, it's okay. Hopefully someday a game will take its place. A game that brings groups of friends together. A game that sucks, but we still all play it every day. But until then, we're stuck with Destiny 2. A game that sucks, but no one plays it anymore, so it's just me and fucking iBooty Juice. Because we're the last 2 losers on the planet who still play this goddamn shit. Anyway, thank you all for watching and listening to me ramble about a shitty game that absolutely does not hold up. This is probably the most bottom of the barrel as far as this series goes. I don't think any other game, unless they're completely depreciated and don't have servers, is going to be this lacking in replayability. So it was interesting to kind of see how low things could go. But as always, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and leave a comment for whatever potential Xbox 360 game you might want to see me replay. You know, like, comment, share it around, and I'll see you all next time.